Hello bellezas, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here then just welcome. Hi, my name is Brenda. I do paranormal videos here on this channel, so if that is something that you are interested in, please consider subscribing down below and turn on all your post notifications so you do not miss when I post another video like this one. Now with all of that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into today's video. Okay, hello everybody, welcome back and happy Friday. I hope that you guys are all doing really good and that you had a really good week and that you have an even better weekend. Okay, let's go ahead and get into today's video. As you guys can tell by the title, I am doing another one of the hauntings in a certain state, and today we're doing Minnesota. It's very random because honestly I was just thinking, I was like, what state could I do next? And Minnesota just popped up into my head and I was like, okay, let me look up what they have over there. What's going on in Minnesota? I've never been there before. I really don't know anything about the state, and it's, yeah, as I said, it was very random. But if you want to suggest a state that I should do next, make sure to leave it in the comment down below, and then based on how many times I see that same state pop up, then I'll probably choose that to do next. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into this. I'm going to be reading from two different articles about two different locations that are known to be haunted or people claim to be haunted and the reasons behind it. So let's get to it. Let me get a little drink of my cafecito in my cute little mummy mug. It's so cute. I got this from Target a long time ago. Okay, I'm ready now. Now I have all the anxiety in the world. Okay, this first location is Loon Lake Cemetery, and this is the haunting of that cemetery. Mary Jane Terwilliger was born on January 5th, 1862 in Border Plains, Iowa. She was the eighth and last child of John and Phoebe Terwilliger. That's a hard name for me to pronounce. John and Phoebe lived long lives. According to her obituary, published in the Spirit Lake Beacon on March 3, 1908, Phoebe was born in North Carolina in 1816 and married John Terwilliger in Illinois in 1848. John and Phoebe moved to Ohio and lived there for a little more than 3 years. The couple's final move was to Minnesota Township on the southern border of Minnesota, where they remained as farmers until John's death on September 7, 1905, at the extraordinary age of 101. John was buried at Loon Lake Cemetery. A compassionate obituary published in the Spirit Lake Beacon on September 15, 1905, refers to him as Grandpa Terwilliger and states, "Peace to the spirit of a worthy pioneer." Almost a year after John's death, Phoebe went to visit her sons in Idaho for what turned out to be an extended and final stay. Although Idaho agreed with Phoebe, who improved in health and weight, she caught a cold in February 1908 that developed into pneumonia and resulted in her death on February 26, at the almost as extraordinary age of 92. Phoebe's remains were returned to Minnesota, where her funeral was held on March 4th, followed by her burial beside her husband. By the time John and Phoebe were interred at Loon Lake Cemetery, their youngest child, Mary Jane, had been buried in the same ground for more than 25 years. Unlike her parents, Mary Jane did not enjoy a long life. She died on March 5, 1880, at age 17. The circumstances of Mary Jane's death have been told and retold by generations of people, published in books and propagated by the media, especially via the internet. Here is a tale of two accounts. First, however, we must fast forward in history a good 125 years. Loon Lake Cemetery is currently regarded as one of the premier paranormal spots in its region. As recently as October 2012, CBS News of Minnesota listed the cemetery as one of 4 best burial grounds to visit for a real scare from beyond the grave. The cemetery is also identified in Mark Moran and Mark Skurman's book, Weird US, in which one local resident is quoted as saying, "It seems like everyone in this part of the state knows about it and goes there at least once while growing up. It's given me more sleepless nights than I care to admit. I've heard too many stories and been frightened personally too many times because of it. I will never go there again." There are numerous apparent reasons for Loon Lake Cemetery's eerie reputation, one being its shadowy antiquity. The cemetery was established in 1876 and includes at least 100 known interments. One of the eternal residents of Loon Lake died before 1876. They were originally buried on private property and were relocated to the cemetery after its establishment. There are no official records for at least 10% of the buried. Abandonment also contributes to its mysterious nature. The cemetery, once owned and maintained by a Methodist church, was orphanaged long ago, when the church burned to the ground. No one has been buried at Loon Lake in more than 90 years. The uniqueness of the location also contributes to its eccentricity. Located atop a knoll overlooking Loon Lake, the site can be seen from miles around. Only a fraction of the known interments in Loon Lake Cemetery are still marked by headstones. Hence, considerably more human corpses lie within its earth than are identified. The road that once led to the cemetery no longer exists, and the location is primarily visited by campers from a nearby park, ghost hunters, teens seeking morbid adventures, and thrill seekers, many of who have documented their experience on websites devoted to the paranormal, on YouTube, and via photographs. Yet, Loon Lake Cemetery is uncanny, not only or even chiefly because of its antiquity, abandonment, location, and abundance of unmarked graves. It is a legend that people tell, especially the legend of Mary Jane Terwilliger, that makes it so. As the legend holds, Mary Jane I'm done saying the last name. As the legend holds, Mary Jane, believed to be a witch, was beheaded in March 1880 by the citizens of nearby Petersburg, Minnesota. While the legendary execution is consistent with Mary Jane's official date of death, the accounts do not specify where the alleged execution took place. Although many versions claim that she is buried with the axe that severed her head, some accounts claim that Mary Jane was not alone in her dealings with the occult, that in fact she was part of a coven of witches whom the locals warily tolerated until their witchery started causing trouble and terrorizing the non-witch townsfolk, quoted in Moran and Skurman's book. Hence, in this version of the legend, 2 other witches were also hunted down and similarly beheaded. The witches are buried out in Loon Lake because it was desolate and used mainly to bury orphans. In other words, these witches would be out in the middle of nowhere, not buried with God-fearing Christians. Indeed, people in the region often refer to Loon Lake Cemetery simply as the witches' graveyard. As the only witch consistently named, Mary Jane is the primary focus of the legend. David Ellefson, a native of the area and the original bass guitarist for the metal rock band Megadeth, grew up familiar with the legend and occasionally visited the grave. Inspired by the legend, Ellefson co-wrote the song Mary Jane on Megadeth's album So Far So Good, So What, 1989. The lyrics describe being haunted by a witch of the wind, and the words of the song's bridge section match the time and weather faded epitaph on her tombstone. Kind friends beware as you pass by. As you are now, so once was I. As I am now, so you must be. Prepare yourself to follow me. These exact words constitute the epitaph on the tombstone of Clorinda Allen, who died on October 15, 1885. At age 65. Clorinda is sometimes identified as one of Mary Jane's accomplices in the occult. These witches, and especially Mary Jane, are said to haunt Loon Lake with a presence that can be felt. Strange winds, unexplained drops in temperature, glowing orbs, and mysterious noises. It is also said that if you step on or over Mary Jane's grave, you will die an unnatural death within 72 hours. Damn, they have it down to the amount of hours. Local stories accentuate the threat with tales of people who have walked over the grave and come to strange and ghastly ends. An ascending fog allegedly caused one such careless visitor to pull over in his car, where he died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Local stories attribute suicide as many as 4 fatal car accidents and other tragic ends to the curse. Yet despite all the drama, witches, beheadings, strange epitaphs, a curse, and tragic deaths in what happens to be a graveyard forsaken by God and humans, what is most notable about the legend of Loon Lake is how little of it is true. At least according to all known historical records, Mary Jane did die on March 1880 at the age of 17, but she spent her final days in Cherokee, Iowa, where she worked as a domestic servant. Official records identify the cause of her death as diphtheria? I think that's how you say it. A once common and deadly respiratory disease for which there was no effective immunization until the 1920s. Her remains were brought to her parents at Loon Lake, and we have no doubt that her head was fully attached to her neck. The origins of the fabricated ghostly witch legend of Mary Jane are unclear. Mike Kirchmeyer, the director of Jackson County Historical Society, is also unsure, but he has vast knowledge of the history of the area and a reasonable hunch. He says, "I think that story goes back to the 1880s, where there was a guy named James S. Peters who lived out there, and he had this thing about witches. In Iowa, when he ran a mill down there, things didn't go right, so he blamed it on the witches. I think he brought the concept of witches to Jackson County and the Loon Lake area. I think that story sort of lingered just in that area with the people that lived there until a church close to the cemetery closed and they opened a bait and tackle store in there, and this guy sold beer. The neighboring county was dry, so people came from distance to buy beer there. And so he liked the business and told the story about the witch cemetery down the road. There's even an article in the paper where he bragged about it. He said, yeah, they liked the story, so I kind of helped it along a little bit. That's always the case. It's like people are bored and they're just like coming up with entertaining stories to tell people who aren't from there. And they're like, well, I'm a local, so they'll believe the stories that I have to tell and they'll be really intrigued, and then they have all this attention, and then it kind of just builds from there. Police occasionally recover headstones that have been stolen from Loon Lake Cemetery. The police find them out on people's lawns. Michael Kirchmeyer told us they thought it was a joke. The last guy the police caught said he took only 1 stone. Another individual had 4 of them. This too is the ultimate fate of Mary Jane's headstone, which was stolen in the 1990s, was recovered by the police, and is now held at the Jackson County Historical Society. The tragedy of Loon Lake Cemetery ought to be apparent. The large cemetery is a final resting place for the earliest pioneers who settled the region. A great many are first-wave European immigrants born in the late 1700s and early 1800s. It is also the final resting place for many who have fought for rights and liberties. Buried in Loon Lake are 4 veterans of the Civil War and 1 veteran of the War of 1812. Yet perhaps none feel the anger and pain over the destruction more than the descendants of those who are buried there. Indeed, things defined are real in their consequences. There are no witches in Loon Lake Cemetery any more than there are witches in Salem Village in 1692. Yet what was defined as witchery resulted in the real execution of 19 people in 1692, just as the ghostly witch legend of Loon Lake Cemetery has been instrumental in its destruction. That's such a crazy story, or like a series of events, because I don't know if the fact that there was this local legend about witches, obviously I don't think exactly is a reason why the cemetery was abandoned. I just feel like they didn't want to put the funds into keeping it in good condition or having somebody go out there and take care of it. But either way, it is sad that somebody made up all these things about a family and then was telling it around to a bunch of different people, and the family name for those people who are connected to them now have like all these crazy things being said on their name. It's crazy what people will run with without doing any fact checking or anything like that, because obviously this whole article was basically to show everybody like the legend of that area and the fact that so many people are going to do paranormal investigations and then not doing any research as to why it's considered haunted. I mean, the fact that it is such an old cemetery that's been around for such a long time, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of activity of some sort, especially with the way that people could have possibly died in that area if it was from like a civil war or anything like that. If they are buried there, if there's any restless souls, it's not impossible. But anyway, that's that for that cemetery. And now there's going to be a second one that I'll be reading, and this is about the ghosts of Greycloud Island, also in Minnesota, of course. Okay, let's get into it. Greycloud Island is located in Washington County, Minnesota. It is a very small area with an equally small local population. This tiny location draws the attention of people frequently because of the historic sites found at Greycloud Island. There is the famous lime kiln and the Greycloud Cemetery. History buffs find the site a fascinating place to visit, as no matter how hard people tried to turn the island into a thriving community, most people had no interest in living or working on the island. Another reason why so many people venture to the area with an estimated population of 300 people is because of all the stories of paranormal activity and ghost sightings. There is also a very strong connection to Native American history at the location due to the number of Native Americans buried on the island, as well as the fact that it has been an early Native American settlement. For many believers in the paranormal and ghosts, Greycloud Island is one of the most haunted places located in Minnesota. Here is the history of Greycloud Island. The area is also known for woodland mound builders. A great deal of fur trade was also done on the island for many years. The presence of Native Americans is the most significant for the area, as it was a Native American from which the area's name was taken. The tribe of Dwakanton, Dakota Sioux, I don't know if I said that right, I'm so sorry if I didn't, lived in the area around the late 1700s and early 1800s. It was from this tribe that the island eventually acquired its name. According to reports, the chief of the Dwakanton, Dakota Sioux, had a daughter who was named Greycloud Woman. This was the first Greycloud Woman, and she went on to marry James Aird, a fur trader. They went on to have a daughter named Margaret, who was also known as Greycloud Woman II. A man by the name of Hazen Moores went on to marry Margaret Aird, or the second Greycloud Woman. It was this Greycloud Woman for which the island received its name. Many attempts were made to try to build a strong and successful settlement on the island, but all of the attempts failed miserably. There are few homes on the island, but according to reports, Greycloud Township offered those that lived there no schools, libraries, firehouses, police stations, churches, or bars. The island does boast the Greycloud Lime Kiln as well as the Greycloud Cemetery. The Greycloud Lime Kiln was built roughly around 1846. The kiln stood 35 feet tall and was roughly 20 feet around. It was built for creating quicklime. Quicklime was used for fertilizer and also mortar. It was considered to be a defining structure during the early industrial era. Along the Mississippi River is the Greycloud Island Cemetery. The earliest marker and verified burial in the area belongs to a baby by the name of McCoy. It dates back to 1873. There are countless stories of paranormal activity at the cemetery. As a direct result of all the ghostly stories, the cemetery is locked and no one is permitted on the premises after sunset. Furthermore, only people living in the local area or people who are directly related to someone buried in the cemetery can also be buried there per strict guidelines. And now the hauntings. The reports of ghostly sightings and paranormal activity are so extensive at Greycloud Island, it is difficult to determine which is an urban legend and which is fact. With so many stories and reports made, Greycloud Island is considered one of the most haunted places in Minnesota. One of the most popular reports of paranormal activity is that of the Green Lantern. Based on different stories, there are those that say a former Indian chief wanders around the cemetery carrying a green lantern. Others report he simply wanders around the cemetery. Further stories claim that the Green Lantern is not carried by anyone. The unusual green light simply appears to move through the cemetery grounds, the woods, and along local roads. Some people have claimed to see the greenish light in the form of an orb or a cloud. Other people state that they have seen regular orbs around the cemetery and surrounding area. There are also a number of reports that the Greycloud woman, the second, wanders around Greycloud Island despite the fact that she is buried on the Sioux reservation with her mother. Since the area has a great many Native American burial mounds, there are those that claim activity on the island is related to the spirits of the deceased. On nights with a full moon, people have stated that they have heard the sound of drums beating. Hearing the howling of coyotes at night or their barking is also something many people swear to have heard when on the island. People who have visited the island also claim that the air is very heavy and thick, making it hard for one to breathe. This particular claim is one that other people adamantly dispute as they have never experienced anything like it. A rather unusual bit of activity that numerous people have claimed to experience is that of a white truck that appears to chase people on the island. Some say that the truck appears and vanishes without a trace. Others claim that the truck has no driver. Those that have encountered the truck are adamant that it's not made up. There are also reports of a ghostly apparition on a motorcycle that follows people and then vanishes into thin air. Some people dispute that story because of the pickup truck, stating there are locals who chase off nosy trespassers. When it comes to a lot of the paranormal activity reported, there is a lot of connection to the Greycloud Cemetery or tombstones in general. There is one report that within the cemetery sits a row of 12 tombstones that belong to a group of nuns. People claim you can walk and count 12 tombstones, but if you turn around and recount the same tombstones, you will not be able to count 12 the second time. One group of people interested in this haunted claim went to the cemetery. A mother who had taken her son was in that group. The mother stated that while she watched her son counting the headstones, there was a ghostly figure of a young boy following behind her son. They immediately left the cemetery in a panic. The stories of unusual activity in the cemetery abound. There are reports that people can hear disembodied voices, while other people claim to hear the horrified screams of a woman. Other reports from paranormal enthusiasts claim to have seen a man wearing a red flannel jacket and an orange hat while smoking and carrying a rifle. The sight would not have caused any issues with those that have seen the man, but they say he is translucent. One woman who saw the man in the red flannel stated that although he never uttered a word to her, he stared at her, causing her such uneasiness that she left the area immediately. According to her report, the man reappeared right behind her in the road, and shortly thereafter she kept seeing him in her back seat when looking in her rearview mirror. One small group of friends who went to see if they could see the man in the red flannel never saw him. However, when leaving the island, they heard the sound of a young girl whispering from the side of the road, "Don't come back." But there was no one in sight. There are many accounts of people driving past the cemetery or around the island, and there is an overall feeling of uneasiness and fear that creeps into people. Some people have reported that when they have driven onto the island and gone to the cemetery that their car loses all power. Terrified due to the sound of a woman screaming and overall creeped out feeling, the owner of the vehicle managed to get it pushed out the gates. As soon as the vehicle was on the other side of the cemetery gates, the car immediately turned on. Radio blared and the lights came on. The driver and his passengers immediately left the island for fear of what had just happened and what could have occurred. Countless haunted stories continued to be told about Greycloud Island. Locals would prefer if most people simply did not visit the island, as they claimed there is no unusual activity ever. Other avid ghost hunters claim there's plenty of unusual activity in the area, from orbs to screams, odd feelings and sightings of everything from long deceased Native Americans to the ghost of a woman who appears to be mourning the loss of her baby. And that is it for Greycloud Island. Oh, wild. It's so crazy how many of the stuff that people are claiming have been debunked, or people who actually live there long term have just been like, none of that ever happens. But then people go out there and ghost hunt or just want to check it out and they experience something. Is it just because the people who actually live there don't go out and look for this, and then that's why they've never experienced anything, because they're not going out to the cemeteries at nighttime and trying to find something? It feels like that's the difference, is the fact that the locals are just living their life and going about their days without really thinking about the stuff and without really paying attention to any of it, and living in ignorance so that they can continue to live in this area, even though apparently there's been no effort to actually make it a livable area where you have police and all of this stuff. I guess that was maybe when it was established, because it seems like people living there's no way that they would be able to continue to live there without a police station or a fire station or even a grocery store, unless they have to keep going to the mainland to pick any of that up, or if police from the mainland have to drive over to the island whenever anything happens. I don't really know. But anyway, these two stories were pretty interesting, and I like the fact that they were both kind of written in a way where it's just kind of telling you what people have claimed, and there's no actual concrete evidence as to whether or not these things are real. But it's all for everyone to form their own opinion on it and decide whether or not they believe in, and that's basically it. That's that, and that's how basically anything paranormal should be taken. Just at face value. You can't really do that for most of it, and you kind of have to form your own opinion on it. But anyway, that's going to be it from me, guys. I hope that you enjoyed those two stories, and hopefully this wasn't too long for you to listen to. But thank you so much for making it all the way to this point, and if you did, make sure to comment a little tombstone emoji. That way I know who stayed all the way to the end. I think there is a tombstone emoji, if I'm not mistaken. If not, I'll put whatever other emoji for you to comment down below. That way I know who stayed all the way to the end. And if you did, just know that I love you so much. I appreciate it. And also, today's comment shout out goes to this person right here. Thank you so much for leaving a nice comment. As always, I really do appreciate it, and it makes my day. And if you want to be the next comment shout out, all you have to do is leave me a nice comment down below, and that's it. Thank you again, guys, for watching. Hopefully I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to stay safe and be kind. Bye bye.